Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Strategies to Enable Advertising Targeting and Measurement in a Privacy-Regulated World. Today, our webinar is sponsored by Tavant, and we're going to be hearing from someone from Tavant a bit later who's on our panel. But first, let me sort of set this up. What are we talking about today? What we're really talking about today is a bunch of acronyms. We have so many acronyms in this world, GDPR, CDPA, we have Mobile Ad IDs, we have IDFA. The world has changed quite a bit in the last several years because of privacy that has impacted or starting to impact targeting and measurement. And there are significant headwinds here. And what we want to do today is we've got a great set of panelists that I'm going to walk through and introduce in a moment. But what we're going to be talking about today is what exactly are these headwinds? How is this going to impact targeting and measurement? What are some solutions? What are some of the winners and losers in all of this? And let's not forget consumers. Let's definitely spend some time touching on consumers. And so before I make the introductions, just a little bit of logistics. I am going to be doing Q&A. So I'm going to allow about 10 minutes at the end. If you navigate to the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little Q&A button that you can click. Go ahead and add your questions anytime during this. If you have any question at all, go ahead and put them in there throughout the webinar, and we'll address them towards the end. Let me kick things off. I'm Ken Mallon. I'm a 20-year vet in the ad tech space. I've worked at large media companies, including Yahoo and Microsoft, worked on the advertising research side at both Kantar and Ipsos. And I've also worked at some smaller innovative companies like Samba TV and 4Info. Recently, about 6 months ago, I launched Mallon Advisory Services, which is an advisory and consulting service. I do corporate mediation, life and executive coaching, and I do technical strategic advising. So let's just kick it off and do some introductions. I'm going to start with Kamal Bokhari. I'm really happy to have Kamal here. Kamal is a general manager of data and analytics at Dish Media Sales. He's really sitting on set-top box data and is looking to do research, analytics, reporting, and so forth in that role. He oversees data product roadmaps, and we're just delighted to have him here to give us that perspective really about the modern data ecosystem as it reflects on TV. Next, we have Eamon Boyle. Eamon, you there? He is SVP of Growth Sciences at Intermedia, which is an Omnicom company. He's an analytics data strategy measurement professional, so he's going to be able to cover everything here. He has a PhD in applied modeling, extensive experience in data mining, insights, predictive modeling. One of the things about him is he knows a lot about, we're not going to talk about today, but knows a lot about visualization and has received some accolades around his knowledge and expertise there. Next, Jim Spaeth, who you may know as the former president of the ARF. Yes, the ARF for a full 7 years. He serves on boards. He does a lot of, he works a lot with industry associations. Just a long time been in the industry, and he's the co-founder of Sequent Partners, who many of you know. They do a lot of great, fantastic thought leadership and work. Finally, Ravi Pervali from Tavant. He heads the media and gaming practice at Tavant. He has really a lot of deep industry experience around ad tech, analytics, targeting, measurement. A lot of deep understanding of what's going on the publisher side. So we'll be reaching out to him to get some of those publisher insights later. More recently, he's been focusing attention on leveraging technologies like AI and ML in some of these algorithms to solve key industry challenges. And so welcome, panelists. I'm super happy to have you here. To kick things off, now we talked about these headwinds. What exactly are these headwinds? Kamal, I hope you don't mind me going to you first. What exactly are these headwinds? What has happened in the last few years to cause people to have some of these changes around thinking with targeting and measurement?
Thanks, Ken, for having me, and thank you, Tavant, for sponsoring. As Ken said, I'm Kamal Bokhari. I head up the data analytics team at Dish Media. Dish Media is the advertising sales arm for Dish Network as well as Sling TV. So Ken, to your specific question, the headwinds has been, as consumers are getting smarter about their data, as well as a lot of these privacy standards that have been put in place that started with GDPR, then it came to the United States as CCPA, are kind of separating the folks that own data to the folks that do not own data. Dish Media, Dish Networks is in a very good place because we have the direct relationship with our subscribers where they have the option of opting out of any type of data collection, any type of advertising, targeting ads. But from our experience, our subscribers actually enjoy relevant ads. So we've been put in a very good position because we own our data. Some companies that are in our ecosystem that license data from others or do not own their own data, they're going to be in a tough position because they don't have that direct relationship with the consumer.
Thanks, Kamal. Let me go to you, Jim. Just add a little bit more color here, just from a big picture industry's perspective. What are the top 3 things people need to know about what's happening in terms of privacy and what how things have changed? What exactly are these headwinds?
Yeah, I mean, I would start with, we all need to educate ourselves about even just the current state of data quality. There's a lot of missing data, messy data, unmatchable data, inaccurate data, and I don't mean to be doom and gloom, but it's far from perfect, right? So we need to understand the current state, and then we need to understand what the impact is being. I can't say is going to be because it's happening right now, and it's going to continue to happen. What the impact is going to be of things like cookie deprecation and the potential for SDKs having a more difficult time tracking locations and all those things that are happening right before us. We need to understand the impact. And all too often I hear people say, well, my match rate is thus and such. And that's only half the story, because the other half of the story is how accurate is the underlying data and how accurate was the data when it was matched up. So demos or product purchase matched up to media data for advanced targeting or for attribution, for example. And it's not just a question of data loss. I mean, we're swimming in millions of records of data. That's wonderful. It's a question of the bias, right? So if the data you can acquire for targeting or attribution, let's say, comes from a particular source, it's not designed for research. I mean, that's the other reality that we live with, is that we're not using data designed for research. We're using data that's found, and it comes in different levels of quality. So we don't know what kind of bias that might introduce, and we don't know what the biases that are introduced through the processing. And then in the end, what we don't know and need to know better is what impact does that have on the guidance, on either the efficacy, let's say it's targeting, how good is the targeting, or in the case of attribution, how good is the guidance coming out of the attribution? Is it too warped? Is it like looking at the world through a funhouse mirror, or is it good enough? I'm not sure that was 3, Ken. I'm sorry.
No problem. Nobody was counting. Well, I want to do a deep dive into targeting a little bit. Now mobile is obviously huge these days. What exactly is happening in the mobile ad ID space, which is the main ID used for tracking and so forth, when it comes to targeting? For example, the general practice today, if I'm not mistaken, is that one might observe certain mobile ad IDs having a certain behavior. Maybe it's consuming certain content versus visiting certain locations. And that set of individuals is used to build lookalike models to find people that are similar, generally speaking. Well, there's a lot of different ways that targeting is built. There's also layering on third-party data, demographics, income, and stuff like that. But that particular use case, how is that impacted now with changes being made by, companies like Google and Apple? Any hand raising to take that question?
Yeah, I think when you look at that, there's a couple of things that's happening there. And I just go back a little bit to what Jim was saying. You go back and think about, with the advent of digital, we were going to have all this data and we could see every single thing. That was the belief. And we got to the point where we start thinking that everything is now digital, is almost addressable. That's not the case, okay? A couple of years ago, as mobile became much more important, there was a lot of media campaigns driving through to mobile and driving then through to app as well. And so the idea here is that there was a lot of information because people were using their phones for every single thing. And this was going to be a very good place to actually capture people, understand their behavior and all of that. And with these regulations, the idea now is you're not going to fit to track them the same way. These people are going to fit to do a lot of this. But the question is, can then people retarget them back when they know this information about them? So, as people will say, I'm an adult, I'm 50 something, and I haven't seen an ad for diapers in many, many years, or I haven't seen an advertisement for cigars or cigarettes, and I don't ever need to see those. Whereas now that will actually stop happening because you can no longer separate those people out. So it's those other advertisements that are coming in that cannot be treated the exact same way. So that's where people are seeing the impact. The people, as their data gets protected, they will not then also benefit from the fact that as their data is not being released, that is where the issue starts to come up. But again, I think it's a little bit overestimated. The other thing is constantly in this innovation that's taking place, there's always going to be a set of new players coming in the market who are going to come up with solutions. So, and the whole idea of identity graphs and identity solutions are going to go hand in hand with the ability to actually capture the individual IDs, it gets removed. The idea of catching them across different devices is removed. There are going to be vendors who will come in and then have a way of actually capturing them, but they're not releasing that information at the same time.
Got it. Yeah. And I'm glad you reminded us that the reason we got so excited about digital 25 years ago is that we thought of it as being the measurable media, right? And first it was about clicks. And then pretty quickly we realized that click is not that strong an indicator of outcomes, but some really great technologies got built to measure the effectiveness of advertising. Some innovative companies like Dynamic Logic built brand impact measurement. A bunch of companies came on the scene to measure the effectiveness of advertising on offline sales. So we're getting excited, and a lot of dollars have moved toward digital because it's thought of as being measurable. Is this going to taint that somewhat? To what extent are all these headwinds going to make digital kind of not as measurable as before? Ravi, is this something you think you can comment on? You're muted.
Sorry about that. I've been doing this so long, you would have thought I would have learned. So one thing is, Ken, with regards to Apple ID and the mobile IDs, so I think the regulation is changing. They're not totally disappearing. It is going to be more of an opt-in. So if you are going to use an ad ID, you have to have an opt-in option. So I think one of the things that publishers or whoever is using these ad IDs need to do is educate users and actually have the opt-in message really outline what data they're collecting and how it's beneficial. So and you're already seeing this where a lot of advertisers, publishers, etc., are actually educating their users. That's number one. So the other thing is, as I said, I'm coming more from the publisher side because we do work with a number of publishers. So this notion of third-party cookies going away, ad IDs going away. So it's not something that came up yesterday. It's been well known. And if you look at a lot of companies who are more multinational, work in Europe, with GDPR, they've already taken steps. So some of the things that we're seeing is there is a lot more contextual advertising. So what does that mean? I think a lot more investment in natural language processing, video image processing. So a lot of companies on the publishing side are investing in these technologies. And I think finally, it, as Kemal said, a lot of emphasis on, first party data, building robust data warehouses. So that's sort of the trends we are seeing.
That's right. I mean, you're right that we are talking about a lot of these IDs going away, but maybe that's not so much the case, right? Because publishers, people who have the apps and so forth, will create incentives, correct, for users to choose to opt in. And Jim, a little earlier, you mentioned bias, right? And so now if you have a different subset of people now opting in, are the people that are opting in going to be different? And is that going to create a whole set of other challenges for people regarding targeting and measurement because the subset of people providing their data is now different?
Yeah, you really have to think about the use cases, right? So the easiest one I would say is targeting, and it's not is it right or wrong targeting is a continuum. And so if you started out by saying I'm just going to send my message to everyone, well, a lot of those messages are going to fall on deaf ears. They're going to be wasted money. All right, I'm going to target contextually. I'm going to go to the right media choices, and that kind of depends on how specific your product is. I mean, if you're selling diapers and you're in a website for young mothers, then that's probably not too terrible. If you go into general media about detergents, that might not be so good. And then you could add demographics, right? So now I'm going through the traditional litany of targeting. And the promise of, as you said, digital was kind of, okay, well, and add mobile, right? Because we used to talk about having a UPC sticker on our foreheads. And that's what this was. This is my UPC sticker. This tells you it's me, where I am, what I'm doing, all that kind of stuff. So that's great. But the fact is, if your assumption, your expectation was, I can target to me exactly every time with 100% accuracy, that was a dream. And, but even with the biases and the inaccuracies introduced by data loss, it's probably better than targeting the world, targeting demos, and so on. So even with the growing kind of lack of data, and with that lack of accuracy, potential for bias, even with that, targeting is probably still better with the tools we have. Where you really get into trouble is measurement, and I especially focus on attribution. If we're trying to attribute a sale to, let's say, an African American consumer or a Hispanic consumer or a young mother or a whatever target audience. I mentioned the multiculturals because we're very involved in that part of the industry. You can be way off. You can just be way off. And the problem is that you're misattributing value, you're miscalculating ROI, and probably misallocating your media spend as a consequence.
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying is we thought we were more accurate than we were before, and now maybe the targeting accuracy may be dampened a bit because of ID loss. And so does this in fact, and I'll ask you this question to Kamal, does this in fact put more pressure on measurement? And Jim says that's going to be harder. So, if it puts more pressure on measurement, are people that do accurate measurement going to be some of the winners and losers here, or winners, and who are the losers? Kamal, can you comment a little bit on how does this new dynamic of potentially more difficulty targeting, but more emphasis maybe on measurement to make sure your dollars are being well spent, impact the ecosystem in terms of winners and losers?
Yeah, so we at Dish Media, we are in a unique situation because of what we call addressable advertising on television. This is where we use our first party data, our set-top box data, to be able to create those audience segments so that gets to that advertisers to target of folks that they want to send this specific advertisement to. With that, we have return path data that we know at the household level which households were exposed to that addressable ad, and then working with attribution and measurement partners, we're able to share that data in a privacy friendly way for them to be able to put that measurement and attribution together. For companies like Comscore or Nielsen on the impression verification, and then working with companies like Polk or LiveRamp or Experian, where they would be able to put those attribution reports together for the advertiser.
Yeah, maybe I'll just ask this also more generally to everyone else, just real quick. Winners, losers, who's helped by this dynamic? Walled gardens, agencies, research vendors, engineering companies, just real quick. Jim, I'll start with you. Winners, losers.
I don't know who's a winner. I mean, you would say these laws are being put in place to protect consumers' privacy. I don't really see how it protects consumers' privacy, to be perfectly honest. Something as anonymous as a cookie, I don't get that at all. So I think consumers are losers for the reasons I think, Eamon, you mentioned, like not getting cigar ads, right, and baby products ads. And advertisers are losers because they're not hitting their targets accurately, and the media are losers because it devalues their media because the inability to reach their targets accurately.
Yeah.
So I'm
So
not sure who's winning here.
Jim's saying nobody wins. Ravi, you have a different opinion? Any winners here? You're muted.
Sorry, I'm totally in sync with Jim. I think everybody's a loser here, the advertising side, the consumer side. I don't know, Capitol Hill may be a winner. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because at the end, I think one thing to keep in mind, I mean, we're talking on the advertising side, but if you look at media, Ken, 90% of the media that's consumed is ad supported. So if you think about the ecosystem of the consumer, I mean, whether it's Facebook, it's Twitter, it's free to watch TV, if ads are not going to be effective, I mean, in the end, the consumer is going to lose out on this because they have to go to a subscription model. So overall, as I said, everybody's a loser here.
Yeah.
And if I can,
I take the opposite
go ahead.
approach.
Go ahead. Yeah, and I'll probably chime in too, but go ahead, Emma.
Yeah, I take the opposite approach here because I think there's a lot of hyperbole around a lot of this as well. And it kind of goes to, you can find a couple of appropriate quotes for this, whether it's Einstein saying not everything that needs to be measured should be measured to start with, or Turing talking about, we can do all this if we have the imagination to actually do this. There are going to be winners out there. There are vendors that are now being created that actually focus on creating identity graphs and all of that. Their business is there. You have companies like AT&T, Verizon, which have a lot of first-party data because of the volume of customers they have across the country. The data that they have, depending on how they want to use it, they have a huge reservoir of information now and data that's highly valuable that they never had before in the same way that they could exploit. They had it always, but now they can exploit it in a very different way. They're going to be major winners. The companies that created the walled gardens are protecting themselves, and because they remove those IDs, they're forcing you to use their attribution product. So you can selectively find the winners all over the place. And a lot of these companies that have been compliant with removing these, they're saving themselves because they're afraid of getting sued. So there's a lot of different things that are happening there. But at the end of the day, there are going to be companies who are going to go out there and are going to incentivize people to actually opt in to their brands. And because of that, they'll be fit to collect that data. And again, with attribution, you don't need to measure every single person. It's only if you want to retarget to every single person that actually you need to have capturing every single ID. So as long as it's a significantly large enough sample that, again, accounts for the biases and make sure those biases are not included in there. And what Jim is saying, you can actually have attribution that shows the paths. We understand the paths. We understand what are the right messages and how quickly do they convert. So you can do that if the samples are correct. So you can selectively find the winners and you can selectively find the losers as well.
Yeah, and I'm going to take my moderator hat off for a second and chime in here too as well, because I kind of have two ways of thinking about this. First of all, from a philosophical standpoint, whether we're talking about the ad tech world or what have you, whenever there's a dynamic that creates a headwind, it tends to create invention, right? It's a mother of invention when you have these problematic things or you have something that's turmoil. And market forces will bring in people with innovation and great ideas. It's just going to happen. Solutions will be found. And I think the other part of it, if you think about it a little bit less philosophically, is that it's going to put a greater emphasis on science, right? And data collection. Really good science, really good data collection, bias adjustment, good identity mapping, new ways of thinking about combining data sets through pooling data to create privacy. And I think that's where a lot of the invention is going to come from, which makes us shift topics. Let's talk about solutions. Now, one of the things that occurred to me as someone who's been doing this for a really, really long time, it makes me think, gosh, are we going to actually regress a little bit to some things? Is MMM going to become more popular? Are survey techniques going to become more popular for measuring the effectiveness of advertising? Can someone sort of comment generally about solutions? And in particular, do you think we're going to be taking, I don't want to say a couple steps back because these methods have served us well in the past, but comment a little bit about the extent to which old schoolers are going to come out of the woodwork a little bit. Is this one you can take, Jim?
Jump on that for a second, because I hear this often. Oh, market mix modeling is dead. That is so not true. If you talk to any advertiser, it is still their primary source of truth, their primary way of understanding the return on marketing spend, allocating and setting and allocating marketing budgets. So that's there. An interesting thing that's been happening, we've seen over the past couple of years, and this is something my partner and I feel really strongly about, is when you step back from attribution and its dependence upon individual data, which is rather extreme and getting more difficult, right? So if you step back from that and you say, well, what were the benefits of attribution? Granularity. So I can measure, not just the effect of television, but the effect of networks or programs or genres, right? I can get much more granular, and speed. So I can measure it quickly and I can act on it mid-campaign, real time, near real time, something like that. Well, that could be accomplished with marketing mix models as well. It's the data that's been the problem, right? So if the data pipes could be established in a way that we could get not monthly or weekly data, but daily data. So that happens in retail. You can get daily data. That can happen in QSR. That can happen in other industries. And I'm sure if the will was there to do it, you could get daily data, or maybe faster. I don't know. But you could feed the mix machine, let's call it the mix master, more rapidly, and you could have the granularity because you have more observations, more degrees of freedom, and you'd have faster turnaround. So we're hearing advertisers, I'll mention in particular Diageo. Chris Cable has presented a few times that for various reasons they're never going to attribution. He said this 2 years ago. We're going to more granular mix. We want to do mix by day, by zip code. Now, in his business, I guess he can do that. So it's not that analytics technology that's the barrier. It's the data and that same promise of quick turn, highly granular analysis to drive activation could happen either way. So I think it has put more juice back into mix and to one of your points, even it might have been yours. It drives it's the mother of invention. So gee, why don't we do this?
Yeah, I would think that some folks are going to see an opportunity here, try to invent something, get some funding, and I would think that we could have some startups or some larger companies decide to invest. And
Ken, if I can just interrupt for a minute there, and just going back to your prior question about the winners and losers, and I kind of touched on it earlier, but to me, the winners are our company, the consumers, because now they get to choose how they want to, what advertising they want to opt in, how they want to be targeted, and B, any company or entity that has first party data like Dish. We are considered to be winners because we have the direct relationship with the consumer. We have the privacy policies in place. We have the opt-in policies in place. And research has shown time after time that relevant ads are what consumers want. To your earlier point, like if somebody is 55 years old, does not really want to see a diapers ad anymore, while a young mom may want to see that. So I just wanted to kind of chime in on that previous question because I tried to chime in a couple of times, I couldn't do it. So
yeah, no problem. Go ahead, Ravi. Did you want to comment more on consumer?
No, actually, so to Jim's point here, so in regards to attribution, specifically, I'll just touch on that, is if you look at the attribution models that, we are actually working on, they've really been relying on aggregated data. So if you look at the call for action, it may be aggregate visits to a site, it may be, number of calls they're getting, it may be store visits. So we've actually been looking at the way advertising dollars is being spent across different channels But if you look at the call for action where the outcome, they have been at an aggregated level. So, so it's really these loss of IDs are not going to impact a lot of work that is happening, especially with these advanced deep learning models for attribution and media mix modeling.
No, you make a good point, because some of these methods like MMM could have modern versions to them, which use deeper learning, which update more quickly, that use a broader set of data, that are just more dynamic and have more learning aspects to it.
But in addition to that, you're also seeing, say, within the big holding companies like APG, or even Omnicom, they are developing a certain possibilities around this by having companies, say, with an IPG like Kinesio, whose job specifically is to actually work with, something like an Axiom to actually develop an ID graph that then can be worked and used by all the different agencies within that group, in the same way Analect is doing that for Omnicom. And again, you're going to see that across the advertising agency world, where they're going to actually have a set of vendors working within their holding company whose specific job is to actually do that, and it's not dependent on the agencies figuring this out on their own. And then the different brands that they work with will then actually be able to access that. So again, it's that an evolution, and those headwinds are forcing that to actually happen. And even more specifically, you have something like a data robot that's working there to actually create this and use that AI function with smaller amounts of data, taking aggregated data, and be fit to get to that pattern much, much faster than before. So you're seeing that evolution, but it's a case of kind of thinking about the loss in the old-fashioned way. But again, you start looking at the innovation taking place. There's going to be a way to actually get to a better solution. And again, as the quality data improves, as Jim says, the measurement will actually get better. The targeting will get better. It is a function of, as we lose one thing, we need to make sure that the pipes are made correctly. We need to make sure that data is collected and it is cleaner than before. And if we do that, we'll end up sort of in a better place.
You're making a little bit the point I was making before, is this greater emphasis on science, good data collection, cleanliness, following guidelines. People who really focus and invest in that, mix in some innovation, could be potential winners here. So we got a mixed bag. We had a few votes for everybody loses, some optimism that maybe it's not so bad. And even on the consumer side, we had some mixed views. This is bad for the consumer. Some people say it's good for the consumer. Anybody want to chime in one last time around consumer? Because this is an important topic.
I would amend my answer a little bit, Ken, because I appreciate what you and Eamon said about drives innovation, and we're definitely seeing that, right? So there's a problem, that means there's an opportunity. We have a free market, and people are jumping up with all kinds of solutions. Some of them good, some of them not so good. But it's generated a lot of innovation, and we'll see where we come out the other end of this.
And Jim, I know you work in a lot of sort of industry-related groups. Can you just comment, because we have a lot of listeners here who maybe aren't as tapped into some of these industry groups and what they're talking about. What are some things that are happening? Because obviously there's an awareness in all these groups about these headwinds. Are there consortiums happening? Are people getting together? Or anybody rallying around concise ways to get this solved?
There's a lot going on, and I try not to take up too much time, but there's three things that I want to mention. So one is the WFA, the World Federation of Advertisers, and the ANA, Association of National Advertisers here, working under the umbrella of the WFA. The advertisers all around the world are very concerned that they can't measure the reach and frequency of their campaign, and they can't manage frequency across platforms. It's astounding to me, because one of the earliest things I was ever doing in my career was models to estimate reach and frequency. So here we are again, we can't do it. Because we're not able to connect the same consumer across the various platforms that they use. And so they're all working on this. There's a lot of interest in Google's virtual people, virtual ID idea. There's some really sophisticated math there. And to the best of my knowledge, at this moment, still little or no empirical evidence as to how to do it and how to make it work, and does it really work. So that's one big thing going on, and the ANA has been planning and getting their act together, and I think soon we'll come out with an announcement and a plan of action. A second thing that we've been involved in has to do with target audience accuracy, and that part of that is the work that we do again for the ANA and their AIM, Alliance for Inclusive and Multicultural Marketing. So it's all about multicultural marketing, but it's the same exact issue, right? So whether you're trying to target an African American, target a young mom, target a business owner, target a Hispanic, it's all the same challenge. And the big issue there is lack of transparency. And we've been working quite some time now to try to get the providers of these data, these services, to offer more transparency. We've had some breakthroughs lately, and there's some things that have been published and are being published, and we're hoping to have a quarterly update on the kind of transparency of the audience data there. And the third thing I would just briefly mention is the work that Jane Clark and SIM, Coalition for Innovative Media Measurement, does. She's got a number of things, but a recent study by my friends Howard Schimmel and Gerard Broussard on best practices in linking set-top box and smart TV data, things of that sort. The work that my partner Alice Sylvester and I have done on accuracy of data in television attribution models. The SIM will bite off 2 or 3 big topics, pool the support, the money, and the expertise of her membership, which is most of the television companies and most of the major agencies, and we'll learn something each year. So we're moving rapidly without a lot of understanding, I have to say. Very little transparency, very little open experimentation, open knowledge about what works and what doesn't work. And these kinds of initiatives are helping to shed some light.
Great, thanks. That was really helpful, and it it's related slightly. One of the things you mentioned relates slightly to one of the questions that came in, is around ways to protect data. Encryption, SHA tokenization, masking. Are we just going to get smarter about being in compliant and protecting user privacy? Is that one of the directions this is going to go, with just deeper sort of data science and encryption and masking technologies? Anybody feel they can comment on this? Maybe not.
Well, all right. I don't want to monopolize this, but when we talked before about winners and losers, and I said consumers really aren't winning anything here. The issue of being identified anonymously and have advertising targeted to you doesn't seem like a horrible thing to me. I'm more horrified by the fact that I see the same freaking commercial over and over and over again. That really irritates me. And if there were better identification, that wouldn't happen. But the issue that does concern me, that is a real issue, is data protection, data security. So I don't care as much if you have my data, but my God, don't let somebody hack into it and get my social security number and my bank account. And, that's where real harm occurs. So I think the real consumer issue is data security, not so much privacy.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and I think to that point, Kim, there's one thing I think important to understand here is, even prior to all of these things happening with third-party cookies, ad IDs, see, PCI data and protection of PCI data, I think a lot of publishers have taken this very seriously in terms of how they protect it, how they use it. It dates back to, 10 years back, 15 years back. So while, this is going to impact what data is collected and how it's used, I think from a consumer PCI perspective, that issue has been sort of resolved, and most companies are dealing with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. And Jim, you touched on some of the great work that SIM is doing, and some of the work around TV data, ACR, and no secret, I'm formerly led data at Samba TV. I think this is a super exciting area, and I'm sure Kamal would agree, is that having data from TVs, we've had this pattern of digital being thought of as the central collection platform for user consumption and behavior and interest and so forth. And one of the questions that came in from one of our listeners is that now going to shift to the TV as being the main place? We've historically not thought of TV as being digital, but it is. I mean, let's face it, almost everything we do on the TV now is digital, and you get extremely rich data from that. Is there going to be a shift where the TV platform is now thought of as being the central place to collect, target, and measure in a modern world?
Yeah, I mean, if you think of any smart TV that's out there today, it just does not really work when your Wi-Fi is disconnected. All those native apps that are on there, they just don't work. But however, I mean, all the TV brands, and as does Dish, everybody, we give the option to the consumer whether they want that data to be collected. So again, I think the consumer still wins out in that scenario because they have the option. 10 years ago, there was no option. The data was being collected. There was no, I mean, I have a Vizio television at home that if you go into the settings, there is a setting right there that says, do you want us to collect the data? And if you say no, that's it. It's over. But then from a Dish perspective, set-top box data has always been something that's been coveted by advertisers for a long time. There is a lot of scrutiny around set-top box data because you just don't want that data to be connected to PII and be used in a non-measurement use case. So that's why we are very, very protective on how we allow the usage of our set-top box data, and we go through extensive not only security but also privacy audits beforehand before we release any type of data to a third party. And there's continuous auditing that happens both contractually and technologically to prohibit that data being used in a use case that is not allowed, that was agreed to.
The other winner in this can be the consumer as well, because with all IoT, they can wear whatever they need to wear, and wherever they go, you can track, and they want to be tracked in what they're actually doing because they want to show everybody what they're seeing and all of that, and they use many channels to actually do that. And so, the idea that only your phone is a place to actually collect all this data with IoT today, there are going to be so many other ways to actually do that. And one of the things I've been working on is even at the store level, store as media, so you can actually measure how people behave inside a store. So you're actually not even having to get permission from them. In that sense, you're actually collecting information because you're actually observing people as they're doing things. So the technology itself, IoT, is going to change this, and it's going to remove the need to be so concerned about the fact we have to be looking at MAIDs only as the only way to actually collect data. So it's opening up in different ways, and as one thing closes, something else will open.
Yeah, we've got less than a minute left, and I want to save time to thank everybody, but I want to squeeze in one last quick thing because we haven't mentioned international. Some countries have been kind of ahead of the United States in thinking about privacy. Is there anything we can learn by some of these other countries and how they've been dealing with this and sort of being a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of privacy, data protection, and so forth?
Yeah, I can start again.
Because Tavant works in a lot of different countries.
Yeah, we do. And, we work with a lot of international brands who have international presence. So, and this really circles back to Kemal's point. I think the companies that are really going to be winners in this are companies that figure out what to do with their first party data. So it's not just, having the data, it's, what do you do with it? So think about it. There's CRM data, there is data from your subscription systems, multitude of data. So really, I think the winners have been building these aggregated, robust identity systems and doing a lot of analysis around those data. So that's really, I think, what we can learn that's happened, internationally that can be brought here.
So some companies,
and we're seeing those investments here also.
Yeah, so some companies that have already been playing in multiple countries may benefit from the fact that one arm of their companies already learning, large companies like Procter and Gamble's of the world and so forth, Unilever, large international companies like Pepsi and so forth may have some knowledge and probably already embrace things. As Jim said, they're already pretty much using mixed modeling to begin with. So we're going to close. I want to thank everybody, Kamal, Jim, Ravi, Eamon.
Sure.
Wonderful to have you here today, and a special thanks as well to Tavant for sponsoring this and putting this on. To learn more about Tavant, go to tavant.com. I'm Ken Mallon with Mallon Advisory Services, and thanks again for joining.